Temperatures on our planet range from 134 degrees Fahrenheit in Death Valley, California, to minus 128 degrees in Antarctica. While these certainly represent hot and cold extremes, Earth's average temperature is around 55 degrees Fahrenheit. But as a pilot, have you considered the environments you'll fly over? There are 4 zones here on Earth that define their environment: frigid, desert, temperate, and open water. We'll focus on the frigid zone in this video. The most important thing to remember about the frigid zone is that it can be extremely cold. It's almost impossible to survive there without the necessary equipment, skills, and determination. The frigid zone is actually small, covering only about 10% of the globe. The frigid zones encompass the regions above the Arctic Circle and below the Antarctic Circle. They're the coldest regions on Earth, and they're often covered in ice and snow. Their summers only last for around 2 or 3 months and can have up to 24 hours of continuous sunlight. Conversely, winter months have continuous darkness, and there are variations between the 2 seasons. Snow, ice, darkness, and bitter cold is what most people think about when they hear the word frigid. Truth be told, cold land environments can exist over any region you fly, not just in the frigid zone. A cold land environment is one where the temperature is cold enough to harm the human body. It's obvious that hypothermia is the greatest threat in a cold land environment. But did you know that hypothermia can happen in temperatures that are just under 50 degrees Fahrenheit? Most aircrew and pilots dress for comfort of the flight deck, not for the environments they'll fly over. If you experience a forced landing in a sub-50 degree climate, a little sweat, a little wind, and inadequate clothing can amount to real trouble.
What are you wearing?
So, what we're about to discuss can help you in any cold land environment, not just the frigid zones. So how do you survive a forced landing in a cold environment? You pack the right gear, know some basic survival skills, and have a plan. Let's talk priorities. Survival priorities in the frigid zone or any cold environment. The priorities for surviving any post-crash environment are first aid or survival medicine, shelter and regulating body core temperature, signaling, water and food, and maintaining the will to survive. First aid is the treatment of immediate life-threatening injuries given to a sick or injured person until suitable medical treatment is available. This is your priority after evacuating the aircraft and reaching the hole-up site. What is a hole-up site? It's your designated meeting place after a forced landing. Once you're at the hole-up site, survivors should account for all occupants of the downed aircraft and evaluate them for immediate life-threatening injuries. Use first aid kits, supplies, and improvised techniques known as survival medicine to treat injuries and stabilize survivors. If you're in an area with snow, you need to be aware of a condition called snow blindness. It's a situation where your eyes absorb too much sunlight. In snow-laden areas, the sun's rays are reflected from the snow to the eyes, so you need to protect your eyes, and prevention is the best medicine. When out on sunny days, wear some type of protective eyewear to shield your eyes from the sun. Even prescription glasses will give you some protection. Redness and burning are the primary symptoms. Headache, poor vision, pain, and swelling are additional symptoms. A good treatment for snow blindness is to cover both eyes for 18 hours and apply a cold compress to relieve pain and swelling. Your first aid and survival medicine resources will be limited at best. The goal is to keep yourself and others alive and reasonably comfortable. Do the best you can with what you have. Follow up your first aid by distributing water stores equally to all survivors. Drinking water is crucial in any survival situation. After a forced landing, it can help you relieve the adrenaline increase in your body, calm anxieties, and prevent dehydration. The general rule in a survival situation is to not ration your water, but to drink as much as you can when you can, and use your body as a canteen. Now that you've rendered first aid and distributed water, it's time to salvage what equipment and resources are aboard the aircraft and establish an immediate shelter. The purpose of establishing a shelter is to protect yourself and other survivors from the environment and regulate your body core temperature. So what happens when you can't maintain your body's normal temperature? In a cold environment, hypothermia occurs, among other things. During acute heat loss, the body will make immediate physiological adjustments to survive. Sweat pores close to prevent heat from escaping. Body hair stands on end to become more insulating. Carbohydrates and fat stores are burned at an increased rate to regulate the body's temperature. And blood is drawn away from the extremities to the body's core to keep vital organs warm. This helps maintain body core temperature, but subjects your extremities to a lack of circulation, which can cause frostbite or frostnip. When the body core temperature drops to about 95 degrees, shivering begins. It's involuntary, quick, and constant muscular contractions of the body that generate heat. The shivering can be so intense that performing a simple task like starting a fire or using a signaling device could be difficult. Frostbite. Frostbite is the freezing of tissues, including the skin, muscles, tendons, and bones. When tissues freeze, all cellular activity ceases. Ice crystals form and draw water from the cell. This leaves the cell vulnerable to damage, and these cells can no longer take up oxygen and eliminate waste products. Signs of frostbite include a waxy skin color and a texture that's resilient to the touch. There's also a deep numbness to the affected area. The hands and feet are easily affected. Remember that once a limb becomes frostbitten, it's more susceptible to frostbite again. To prevent this, always try to keep your hands and feet warm and dry. Wear gloves when handling cold items or snow. If you do develop frostbite, treatment in the field will be extremely limited. Your best advice is to cover and protect the frozen area from further freezing until medical help can be found. Don't massage the frozen area. This could damage the tissues beyond repair. Don't rub the frozen area with snow. This will promote a deeper frostbite. Don't soak it in kerosene either. And don't try to thaw the area in hot water or over fire. This is very painful and could cause further complications. Frostnip. Frostnip is the freezing of the superficial layers of skin as a result of skin being exposed to cold and wind. Signs include a whitening or ashy look to the skin of the affected area and a waxy texture. Fingertips, earlobes, nose, cheeks, and chin are most vulnerable to frostnip. To prevent frostnip, adequate clothing is a must. When outside the shelter, keep all body areas covered. To treat frostnip, warm the affected area with body heat and protect it from further freezing. However, frostbite and frostnip will be the least of your troubles if your body core temperature falls below 70 degrees Fahrenheit. At this point, you may die. In a cold environment, you have to maintain your body core temperature. The lower it becomes, the more problems you will face. Here are some suggestions to help you regulate your body core temperature in a cold climate. Wear a hat while in the survival environment. 10% of your body heat is lost through the top of your head. Eat foods high in carbohydrates and fat. They're your body's fuel for generating heat in a cold environment. Build a fire. Since fire radiates heat, every shelter and survival situation benefit from fire. Plus, a fire provides light and protection from insects and wildlife and can be a potential signaling device. Clothing will be your most immediate shelter against any environment. The type of clothing you choose can help or hinder your attempt to stay warm. The insulating quality of any material is dependent on the amount of air trapped in the material. Remember that when most clothing becomes wet, it loses its insulating quality. Wet clothing in the wind will draw off body heat 5 times faster than wind alone. It's also important to keep your clothing clean. The insulating qualities of clothing are lost as dirt fills in between the fibers of a fabric. Use the colder principle to ensure your clothing's insulating effectiveness. This acronym can help you remember how to use and take care of clothing. C is for keeping clothing clean. O is for avoiding overheating. L is for wearing loose clothing in layers. D is for keeping clothing dry. E is for examining clothing for damage or wear. And R is for keeping clothing in good repair. Wear proper clothing to keep you warm during the coldest times of the day when there may be little activity. Wool is one of the best natural insulating materials. It'll provide insulation even when wet. A good idea on dressing for a cold environment is to wear a layer of cotton next to the skin to absorb and retain moisture, followed by a layer of wool, and then a water-resistant material as an outer layer. It's a good idea to get in the habit of dressing in 3 layers. Here are some examples of what to wear in a cold environment. Your first layer is undergarments like underwear and socks. Wool is a good fabric to use for underwear if possible. The second layer consists of shirts, pants, boots, hats, and glove liners. Again, wool is the best fabric for the pants. Cotton and denim should be avoided due to their poor insulating quality when wet. In colder regions, boots should be fitted to allow for a pair of polypropylene socks plus 1 or 2 pairs of heavy wool socks. Hats should have the capability of covering both the ears and the head. The best material for hats and stocking caps are wool, polypropylene, or acrylic. Polypropylene is a good material for the glove liners. The third layer should be a parka, wind pants or warm-up pants, and mittens or gloves. The parka should be made of windproof and water-resistant material. It should also have a hood with a drawstring to minimize the opening to the face. Down, Dacron, and Thinsulate are recommended for the parka. Mittens will keep your hands warmer than gloves, but you'll lose dexterity of your fingers. Wind or warm-up pants should also be made of windproof and waterproof material. And an optional layer can include a down-filled jacket, quilted vest, quilted pants, or overboots. If the outside temperature rises or the body temperature rises due to a high level of activity, you can remove layers of clothing as needed to regulate body heat. Wearing appropriate clothing is the first step in providing shelter for yourself. But you can't rely only on your clothing for shelter. You need to establish or construct some sort of shelter as soon as possible. Let's look at some other factors to consider when establishing a shelter. You must use common sense. Be aware of your surroundings. Plan for changes in weather. And stay close to your aircraft. If there's no threat of fire or leaking fuel, the aircraft may be your first choice for shelter. However, the metal shell of the aircraft can transfer heat away from your body in colder temperatures. A general rule is to avoid sheltering in the aircraft when the temperatures are too cold. But since rescuers will be searching for the aircraft specifically, you don't want to establish your shelter in a location where you can't see the crash site. You need to maintain line of sight with the aircraft. Avoid sheltering near sources of water when it's cold, since they're typically cooler and damper. Are you building your shelter in an area that could suddenly flood during a torrential rain? Are you too low in a valley? Cold air can sink, making it cooler near the valley floor. You might want to go to higher ground. Look up. When establishing a shelter, you should always look up. Will this shelter location provide overhead protection, shade, or a wind block, or help retain heat? Protection can be as simple as a low-hanging pine branch, a natural overhang, or a cave. Looking up can also help determine whether your shelter is free from danger. Dead treetops and limbs could crash down during sudden gusts of wind. You must make sure you don't shelter near an avalanche or rock slide area. Direct sunlight can be 40 degrees warmer than shade, and wind will transfer heat away from your body. The idea is to shelter yourself away from the elements, eliminate potential hazards of the environment, and regulate your body core temperature. Look down. Is the ground you'll be sitting and resting on properly insulated? In cold environments, you must insulate yourself from the ground. When the environment is cold, You can separate yourself from where you plan to lie down or sit with foliage or materials scavenged from the aircraft. You can also use snow and ice to build a shelter. Snow and ice, although cold, can serve as effective insulation for existing shelters. Even a rubber life raft could provide protection from the cold and wind. If your shelter is well insulated, you can warm it with your body heat. Keep the shelter just big enough to accommodate you and your fellow survivors, since a smaller space is easier to keep warm. Another idea is to scrape the inside of your shelter down to the bare ground. This can increase the temperature of your shelter by as much as 12 degrees, even if it's cold outside. And a little heat can go a long way. For instance, a lit candle inside a small shelter can raise the temperature by about 4 degrees. Your shelter could also make a good signaling device. If you've covered your shelter with snow, it's no longer as effective for signaling. However, if you're freezing, your immediate needs for adequate shelter may outweigh visibility considerations. Make these types of decisions on a case-by-case basis. Again, look up, look down, and stay inside of the aircraft. Now that you have a decent shelter inside of your aircraft, let's focus on signaling. Priority 3. Signaling. Is the emergency locator transmitter activated? Check that the ELT on the aircraft and any handheld ELTs are activated and transmitting. Prepare flares for use. Read the directions, ensure you know how to use them, and keep them available for quick use. To a certain extent, the length of time you'll spend in post-crash survival depends on the effectiveness of your signaling. Here are some important facts to remember when signaling. Know how to use a signaling device before you use it. Have them ready for quick use. And use them in a manner that doesn't jeopardize your safety or the safety of others. With a few resources and a good imagination, you can expedite your rescue. But if rescue doesn't happen within 24 hours and your resources are limited, it's time to think about procuring water and food. Water is more important than food in a survival situation. Distribute and drink what water you have, then procure more water. Dehydration can happen in every environment. And in a cold environment, you may not feel thirsty. Remember, just because you're in a cold environment doesn't mean your water needs have changed. Finding water may be easy enough, but don't drink it unless it's been purified. Boiling water for 5 minutes or using water purification tablets are the easiest methods. And never eat snow. You're in a cold environment, and snow crystals can damage your mouth and tongue. Eating snow will also lower your body core temperature. If possible, always consume water at or above your body temperature. This will speed up the process of getting the water into your body. Melting snow is a great idea. Use a leak-proof container and set it next to the fire to melt, or place it between layers of clothing. Procuring water. If you do need to find water and snow isn't available, consider the following questions. How far do you have to travel to get it? How will you carry it back? Does it need to be purified? And what's your physical condition? Here are a couple of hints for finding water. Look around and listen. Birds tend to look for water at first light. They'll give you an idea of where water might be found. And look for animal trails. Most of them also lead to water. When you do manage to get water from nature, be sure to purify it before drinking it. You can use water purification tablets, boil the water, or filter the water. However, if it's a matter of life and death and you can't purify the water, drink it anyway. Medical conditions resulting from unpurified water will take a few days to manifest. Hopefully, you'll have access to appropriate medical attention by then. How about some food? It's true that you need more food when it's cold because your body's burning more carbohydrates and fat to generate heat. However, humans can survive as long as 30 days without food. Procuring food. You shouldn't need to eat for the first 24 hours after a forced landing. Water should be a higher priority. But if you do get hungry and decide to look for food, be careful with any food you gather. Eating unfamiliar foods from nature poses certain risks, especially if you don't know what you're eating. Stay on task and maintain the will to survive. Stay calm, optimistic, and busy with jobs and tasks. Focus all your mental resources on rescue and survival. Additional survival tools, such as a sharp knife, a multi-tool, flashlight, parachute cord, and duct tape, could come in handy. So what have you learned about surviving in the frigid zone or any cold environment? First off, the ambient temperature can be cold enough to harm the body. Depending on your circumstances, hypothermia is likely the greatest threat to survival, so you should administer first aid and drink water. Regulate your body core temperature with shelter and fire. Focus on signaling. Procure water first and food if you must. And stay on task and remain positive. For more information, videos, and training programs in aviation physiology, human factors, and global survival, please contact the Aerospace Medical Education Division of the FAA Civil Aerospace Medical Institute. The address is Post Office Box 25082, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma 73125. You can call them at 405-954-4837 or fax them at 405-954-2305. Or you can visit www.faa.gov/pilots/training/airman_education.